They want me to close. Listen to this, listen to this. When Jesus came up,
he came down from heaven.
When he landed
in Israel.
But when there was trouble,
he came down to Africa.
So we must praise him.
Praise him in an African way.
When Jesus came up,
he came down from heaven.
When he landed
in Israel.
When there was trouble,
he came down to Africa.
So we must praise him.
Praise him in an African way.
There was a king. He wanted, but then Jesus came down. So we must praise him. There was a king. He wanted, but then Jesus came down. So we must praise him. No one could touch him. No one could kill him. His name is Jesus. So we must praise him. No one could touch him. No one could kill him. His name is Jesus. So we must praise him.
Awakọ̀ Ọlọ́run ni, awakọ̀ Jésù ni, ìfẹ́ tó fẹ́ wá ló pọ̀ tó fi dá wa sí lónìí. Kìí ṣe pé a jẹ́ mímọ́, kìí ṣe pé a dára, oore ọ̀fẹ́ ṣáláàrí gbà, kì máa ṣàgbára rárá. Kìí ṣàgbára. Ó wu Ọlọ́run ní kí máa ṣàgbára. Ẹni àjọṣàna lókè èrùpẹ̀, wọ́n ti kú, wọ́n ti lọ, a kò fi yọ̀ wọ́n Olódùmarè, àwa fi ń gbórúkọ rẹ̀ ga ni. àwa tí a wà láyé wà láàyè kì í ṣe pé àgbọn àánú ṣàlàrí gbà kì máa ṣàgbára rárá. Ọlọ́run ló wù ó tó fi dá wá sí. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni o, kì máa ṣàgbára wa. Nígbà tí mo ronú mi jinlẹ̀, tí mo rántí bá ṣe bí mi, èmi ẹni àbáta fira tùbà. Olúwa sọ mí dẹni ògo, ó gbé ògo ayé mi sókè. Mo wá dájí tọ̀nà wo ọmọ, ìbà rẹ̀ á tóbi jù, òkìkí rẹ̀ ni mo máa ké. Ìṣàgbára kìí sọ́pà orí rárá. Kì máa ìṣàgbára wa. Kò sóhun tó kù mí kù bí kò ṣe kí n máa jó sọ́ba tó nù mí lómijé nù. Ó fayọ̀ pàbànújẹ́ mi rẹ́, ó mú mi borí ogun ènìyàn, ó gbé mi lékè mo dá ṣẹ́gun. Ìbà rẹ̀ awí máa yẹ ẹ̀hún sára rẹ̀ ọba ògo. Agbára kan, ọgbọ́n orí kọ́. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni o, ìmọ̀ ìṣàgbára wa. Bí kò bá sí t'Olódùmarè, ọ̀tá ìbá pa àná ọ̀la. Wọn ò bá pa mí léwe o, wọn ò bá fi mí payà mí lẹ́kún. Ṣùgbọ́n mo dúpẹ́ mo ráàánú gbà lọ́wọ́ olóore pé mo dòní lókè erùpẹ̀ kì í ṣàgbára rárá. Ìṣàgbára ìmọ̀ ìṣọ́gbọ́n ó dá mi ṣe, àánú ni mo rí gbà.
I hope you are doing very well. Popote Pare Ulipo. Thank you so much for joining us. This was Yoruba music that we're listening to. And in studio, you are with me, Yohani Paulo Imani. Today is the 5th of August, 2023. 5th of August, 2023. So we start a new month, but we also moving towards the end of 2023 as a year in together. So gracias, señores, señoritas, mi amigo y amigas, que habla español, niña y niño do África, de Sudamérica, Venezuela, Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Cuba, Bolivia, Honduras, más, gracias. Asante sana kwa wale mnaongea Kiswahili, watu wangu, nashukuru sana kwa kujiunga nasi. Leo tutakuwa tuna kipindi kwa lugha ya Kiswahili ambapo tunazungumzia sio kwa lugha ya Kiswahili, kwa lugha ya Kiingereza, samahani. Tutakuwa tunaongelea mambo kadha wa kadha. So we appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, bien bonsoir, là où vous êtes. Aujourd'hui, nous allons parler à propos de l'Afrique. Notre programme sera en anglais, pas en Swahili ou bien en espagnol. Merci beaucoup, asante sana, karibu sana, tunawashukuru sana. So what is going on today is what we're going to be discussing on our program today. Pretty much all the things that are going on in Africa. We're going to cover a lot of that. And then we will be able to go over in outside of Africa and get some of some of the information as well. So let me give you this music, then I'm gonna come back. We're gonna be discussing first about the Pan-African calendar. Pan-African calendar, that's where we're gonna be looking into, and then we're gonna move on to the next. Karibu.
Dar es Salaam. Uvyo wangu ndo umenifanya nitoke zangu mjini na kwenda saka mke kijijini. Kulingana Dar es Salaam ya leo kajiwa sitopata mke aliomba kilio. Wajuliza washinga nkapata, wakasema kwamba wendo tonifaa. Nami nikajisi nimepata, vile kutofauti na rembo waliona. Vile umefundwa na madini ya Kiafrika, mheshima ta mavazi unayovaa. Nami nikajua utobadilika, hata tukiwa da. Tabasamu lako la upole, heshima na mapozi ya kale. Sikujua kwamba mjini ni shule, kwamba ungebadilika. Tabasamu lako la upole, heshima na mapozi ya kale. Sikujua kwamba mjini ni shule, kwamba ungebadilika. Dar es Salaam, Dar es Salaam, kila napotazama mimi nakosa, inanifanya nikumbuke tukiwa dom. Leo umeniacha. Dar es Salaam, Dar es Salaam, kila napotazama mimi nakosa, inanifanya nikumbuke tukiwa dom. Leo umeniacha. Dar es Salaam, 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 Dar es Salaam. Niba Mungu huota tene, fadhila zote lakupa, ukona bora wene. Tenda wema wene, akutenai simtende, yale yote lotenda kwako, ukaona bora wene. Kimapenzi ukabadilika, wenye mali wakakuteka, ukasahau ulipotoka. Ulipofika Dar es Salaam, magari ukababaika, kwa starehe ukadanganyika, penzi langu kalitupa. Ulipofika Dar es Salaam, umbile lako la pole, heshima na mapozi ya kale. Ukujua kwamba mjini ni shule, ukabadilika. Dar es Salaam, Dar es Salaam, kila napotazama mimi nakosa, inanifanya nikumbuke tukiwa dom. Leo umeniacha. Dar es Salaam, Dar es Salaam, kila napotazama mimi nakosa, inanifanya nikumbuke tukiwa dom. Leo umeniacha. Dar es Salaam, 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 Dar es Salaam.
Thank you so much for coming in today. As I said already, this was Dar es Salaam, capital city or business city of Tanzania, and the music is called Dar es Salaam in Kiswahili language. And I appreciate each one of you to join us today. We're gonna have a very strong discussion where we're gonna be focusing on the situation in Africa. But before I go over there, I would like to go over, as we do normal, about Pan-African calendar. So what do we have on Pan-African calendar on the month of August? We have Mr. Runoko Rashid. Runoko Rashid was an historian, essayist, author, and public lecturer based in California, Los Angeles. Runoko Rashid was born in 1954 and he died in 2021, so 2 years ago possibly, on 2nd of August. Runoko Rashid was among the what you call Afrocentric lecture. So Runoko Rashid, he's among people who possibly traveled to many places in Africa. He died in 2021 August in Egypt, actually. So he wrote a lot of different books. The Black Star, African, what is this? The African presence in early Europe. So that is among the books, and then you have Global Journey in Searching of African Presence, Runoko Rashid. That's another book. Asata Garvey and Me. Asata Garvey and Me. I don't know exactly what that means. Asata, I don't know what that means, but that's another book. And Uncovering the African Past. So that is also another book. I think he wrote this with maybe Dr. Ivan van Sterma, who we talked about last time. But also there's another book called Africa Star Over Asia. So there is so many books Runoko Rashid, he was able to write. So pretty much we remember him as someone who made contribution to African family. And that is actually why we do what we do, is to recognize our people. We're trying to kind of establish the way that at least maybe we should punish some people if we can, and reward some people. So Rashid, rest in peace. You did your job on right time, and then you have to departure and go to where nobody knows. Some people, they say they know, but nobody knows when someone die. After you die, God knows where someone goes to. So that was it for Pan-African calendar. And I think that will be it. Let me play this script a little bit, and then we're gonna come back in studio where we're gonna start to discuss the issues of today.
I represent Abia South. Constitutional point of order, section 4A. I read, the president shall not declare a state of war between the Federation and another country, except with the sanction of a resolution of both houses of the National Assembly sitting in a joint session. I believe that this is a condition precedent to section 5A.
Constitutional point of order. The reason is this. We can only note what you have just said. He has not declared war. He's only informing us to do the needful by having a robust debate on this and then advising thereafter. And therefore, this correspondence is referred to the next legislative date for proper debate by this chamber.
That the national security is under imminent threat or danger, provided that the president shall, within 7 days of actual combat engagement, seek the consent of the Senate, and the Senate shall thereafter give or refuse the said consent within 14 days.
Well guided, sustained.
So, Brother Eugene, thank you so much for coming in. This was Nigerian Parliament speaking towards what is going on in Niger. As you guys may remember, I think we discussed about this before. Last week we were talking about this in possibly French. Some of you may not be able to get what we were talking about, but we did. So now, in the recap, in Niger, not Nigeria. Niger is a country in north of Nigeria. They are preview French colonized, whereas Nigeria is preview British colonized. So they have a coup d'etat led by military, what sometimes people call junta. It seems like maybe these are legit people. In fact, a lot of Africans start to see that. But so they have a coup in the past, I think it's 1 week now or 2 weeks already. And the junta or the military who take the coup, they actually keep in hostage the preview president. And those juntas or military, they were the guard of the president, who himself nominates to take the duty. So now this raises so much concern, especially when it comes to France, which is the biggest exporter of Niger, especially on uranium and any natural resources. In fact, as you all know, France is always the biggest blood sucker that Africa have ever have, from Cameroon to Senegal, to Mali, to Burkina Faso, to Haiti, because France still owns so much money to Haiti as well. So anyways, I don't want to go through that, but that is what we have on ground. So now after that, ECOWAS, which always act like is the big boy, but it never be big boy, because ECOWAS didn't do anything for all these years. We have experience of terrorism. In fact, even Nigeria itself, it's defeated completely with Boko Haram. So they don't have a lot to say, because Nigeria, as you all know, that children always been kidnapped by those terrorism groups. So anyways, Nigeria, and the leader of ECOWAS now, I believe, is the Nigerian president, who is new. In fact, he possibly come just on ground. He haven't really have much maybe information, but he threatened, and the African Union, I believe it too as well, that they're gonna sanction and even remove those military juntas, or those who did the coup by military power. This is where we are. And so the video you were watching is the Parliament of Nigeria rejected the idea of military fight, because it was gonna escalate the conflict already, because Mali and Burkina Faso, they have already announced that if any country trying to go by military to Niger, they are automatically gonna be involved. So it's gonna be another war. But also, on the other hand, there is also behind the closet, we have Russia, which possibly already have boots on ground, because they are really fighting so much to have dominance in Africa, and they've been doing this for the past at least 10 years. They are trying to establish dominance on African continent. And which is very, very strange. But anyways, so I don't know why, if China have a base together with America and France in Djibouti, I don't know why they don't want Russia also to have one, because I thought they were one people there. I thought China and Russia, they were one, but it seemed like Western, NATO and the US, they don't like China. They would choose maybe to be around, to hang out with China, not Russia. So anyways, Brother Eugene, welcome to our panel discussion. I want to take this moment and ask you a few questions before you go regarding Nigeria, as you can introduce yourself, and then I will ask you a couple of questions. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Imani, and appreciate you, brother, for getting this show together for tonight for the New Africa Network and Swahili for Africa organization. Yeah, we're 300,000 strong all across the African diaspora. And I'm Brother Eugene Telford, also known as Brother Obi Wane, that's my African name, and I'm also the ambassador of Imo State with the federal Nigerian Parliament. And thank you, brother. And glad to be a part of the program this evening. Black Power.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you hear that, he's a Nigerian. Now we are talking to a Nigerian. So, first of all, what do you understand in what is going on in West Africa, in ECOWAS, as a Nigerian? And I know you've been following these ECOWAS things since the 1980s or 1990s, around in that area. What do you understand?
Well, it's an organization that was basically set up to foster an economic alliance between the economic communities of West African states, and that is what that stands for, ECOWAS. And the collaboration is to basically foster trade. It's also an amendment to the clauses to tear down some of the colonial barriers that have divided the nations from doing business with one another. But it's also an alliance to partner up economically to foster a more solid base of economics, whereas the parameters were put in place by the neo-colonializers, the colonial parties that the nations were connected to, and basically at one point wanted to put together an initiative to where they can begin to take control of their own economic destiny. And we call it being self-sufficient, and especially with the abundance of resources that each one of those nations have, but we're not even able to trade next door with one another because of the barriers and parameters set in place to keep them from trading with one another. But needless to say, you have post-colonization, you have neo-colonization that's taking place, and you also have a new scramble for Africa. When you look at Niger, it is one of the leading producers of uranium, yellow cake uranium, but it also has a lot of other minerals that are very vital to the functions of what we coin Babylonian nations. These nations have been blood-sucking many of the ECOWAS, not only ECOWAS, but just say the entire African continent out of suckering them out of their resources, and have yet to pay for reconciliation for the damages that go way back even to slavery time. And for us, Niger, the people are woke. They see that they need roads, they need infrastructure, they need electricity, they need agricultural development. They have trillions of dollars of uranium just by itself as a commodity leaving the nation daily. And the people are fed up. They're trying to figure out where's the money going. So I stand strongly with the people and them standing up for their intelligence about what's really happening, because what's happening is they are truly not getting any benefits out of it. And I'm pretty sure they are strongly part of the labor force that is there as well. And so them getting just pennies on the dollar in this day and time is certainly not adding up, not even for the people of Africa. They're looking at those nations that have been pillaging the financial system, and one of the major players that have been doing that is certainly France. And France have done no justice, but when you go to France, it's a beautiful place. They've done what they have done. The whole aspect of the very existence of France today, as small as it is because it was been blood sucking off of African nations for many centuries. And so this has changed. The people are demanding more as policy makings are being reformed. and there are new government officials that are coming into play. You have many of the government officials who are now what we call the new breed leader African generation. So as one time in history where they were able to run game on our parents and our grandparents, that is no longer the case because we've been educated. We've gone to many of the Ivy League schools that they have gone to. We have attended and associated ourselves with many of the Babylonian institutions, which gave us the recognition of where we as a people have been getting, they've been getting over on us on. So, you know, I take my hat off to the people over there. As part of what's going on with the President Mohammed, I can't really say why they did not give him a chance because he has not been in office very long, and certainly for the people to be riled up as they are, he apparently has done something wrong. But not unless to say, you know, just looking at it as being politically just. Only the people who are on the ground understand what's going on with the dynamics of the politics, and including Nigeria is actually coming in and being a mediator. I take my hat off to my brothers and sisters who are taking the lead to do so as a part of ECOWAS, the ECOWAS Alliance. The whole part of being of the ECOWAS Alliance is to maintain and keep stability in a region where there are plenty to be concerned about, and especially now in the age of the African Industrial Revolution, a new age where Africa is strongly on the come up, and basically the nations are looking at how to form alliances with each other to demand more of a finished made product. But the resources is this. The nations in the new breed leader generation are specifically tired of the colonizers, those colonizing nations, taking from Black people and not giving back. So many of the ECOWAS nations are now demanding that if they're going to come there to do business, they're going to be more radical movements to resolve issues around mining contingencies. From what I'm hearing, there's also going to be a higher cost to obtain those resources, and there's also going to be caps put on how much organizations can come in and mine. And one of the main things that the ECOWAS Alliance has been talking about, if there are long-term concessions of mining and drilling, then there's going to be other mechanisms that are going to be put into place, more measures that are going to be put into place, like bringing mechanical mechanisms to where the raw material can be processed, as well as manufactured into finished and ready-made products, ready-to-go products right there on the continent. Because what's happening, everybody else is benefiting off the raw material except the Africans themselves. And this has become a major and very political and economic conversation with many of the think tanks. African think tanks have been discussing this. And yeah, this certainly change has come about. So, you know, France, including America, including UK and Europe, including Russia and China, and all of the rest of them, as Africans are beginning to go about reforming policies, and they have new administrations coming into play. The treaties, the international trade treaties, African trade treaties between nations are being looked at more closely, and the wording is being more magnified, and also getting certain clauses into place, like I say, limiting concessions on how much of the resources are being taken out of Africa without any type of contribution to those nations themselves. But as Pan-Africans, we're moving towards more of a unified alliance ourselves, where we can begin to control the commodity markets based on the African value, the dollar itself, and being backed by the commodities and the resources that the lands themselves hold, which are able to be more of a beneficial factor to the people themselves on both the front end and the back end. Another thing that the Africans are discussing is more if nations, foreign companies and corporations, foreign nations are coming there to do business. There's going to have to be some type of 50-50 joint venture in between any of the processing of doing business in Africa as well. It's going to have to be a position where the Africans are not getting duped or hoodwinked over the resources, which are their indigenous and natural the natural resources belong to the indigenous people. So this is a very strong conversation these days, and our leaders are really stepping up to the plate. African people are now beginning to hold their officials that they elect to be in certain positions. They are holding them accountable. And with any government, I think that is a very positive way that the people themselves, we have to remember that the government is the people, and the people are the ones that make the decisions about who they elect. And unfortunately, we are seeing many of the African nations now are beginning, and especially the younger generation, are beginning to take a look at these old policies that the nations have had in place for, colonial that have been set in by colonial powers for that time period, and they're not matching up with what's needed today to help elevate what's needed. We need to bring millions of people out of poverty. We need to focus on environmental concerns with mining and drilling, and how much resources are being removed from the continent itself, because from an economic standpoint of view, and also from a micro mathematical standpoint of view, the resources themselves also combined with the environmental degradation of the actual land itself has to be taken into consideration. And so all of these things are a plus added in value when you talk about global warming and harvesting our resources to the point of where you used up everything. So you have to put a cap on it. And I believe this is what the Nigeria is certainly moving towards, to bring more peace about what's happening in Niger. I'll yield the table. Thank you, brother.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I got a couple questions. The first question is, as we see here, ECOWAS was established in 1975. With, like, in the case of fighting for economy and all of those things you mentioned already. So what do you think ECOWAS have accomplished when it comes to economic liberation of West Africa?
Well, that's a really tough question there, because you have to remember, many of the African nations are only 60 years out of liberation from the colonizers that came there, which basically governed all the government and the resources and the business and all the industries. So, African people, just like we here in the diaspora, we're trying to define ourselves in a global network that has grown to be a global electronic network as well. We're moving into a digital age where AI has certainly changed the dynamic of things. But we have to give each other a chance to really define and find ourselves just based on the time frame. 60, 70 years ago, many of the nations in Africa was just being liberated. 60, 70 years ago, we were coming out of Jim Crow and segregated communities, Black people. South Africa just came out in the 80s. So Africa itself, which the dynamics the broad dynamics of even looking at the population and the size of Africa itself alone, looking at 4 United States combined together, and that's what makes up Africa as a whole. So that's a lot of territory of African people, but for the most part of it, I think we're on the right track as far as what ECOWAS is doing. ECOWAS is an alliance by itself, just like the economic communities of East Africa. They certainly have a responsibility to maintain control of what's happening in East Africa as it is an alliance. If I'm not mistaken, I believe East African Alliance consists of Ethiopia, Sudan, you have Uganda, Tanzania, and a few other states that are supposed to be of an alliance. And certainly this is what ECHO was set up to do, just being on the broad spectrum of how much land is to be covered and managed. ECHO is doing this job with having its military forces try to help mediate what's happening in Niger right now. Certainly, like I mentioned before, we don't want the situation get out of hand where it becomes another Rwanda or even what's happening right now in Sudan. And ECHOS is built on to maintaining stability in the region for whatever cost. But I take my hat off to Nigeria, because Nigeria is actually standing up and happen to be concerned about what's happening. I mean, it's much development that has taken place in the ECOWAS region for about 15, 20 years now. You're talking about extraordinary infrastructure, construction, waterfront development. You have the Delgado Group has done extraordinary well with the oil refinery and bridging and developing pipelines so that it can bring more energy resources. And there's certainly have been talks into it with Nigeria even leaking up with Ethiopia and bringing the pipeline from Nigeria to Ethiopia and cross-sharing technological information and cross-sharing and exchanging education. That's been a strong piece of ECOWAS. So yeah, they've done a lot, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I got another question. There is a few questions I'm going to ask you for that. So ECOWAS pretty much, according to you, seem like you're supporting ECOWAS for what it has done. I don't know. But anyways, so another question is people who are doing these coups, as you can see, those soldiers, they are called juntas, but actually a lot of them, they are military. And I think it was in U.S. Congress, or I don't know, Parliament, however you call it, they were discussing how many trained by U.S. Militaries are doing the coups. And they found out that it's almost a lot of those guys who are doing these coups, they have military training from U.S. So how do we know that these people, they are not just being used by Western as well? Just they may be used by Western, but claim on public that they are maybe anti, or they are anti-admin, or they are pro-people, but they are being used. How do we make sure? How do we know?
Well, I don't think it's a sure shot way to make sure that the people of a nation maintains patriot to the nation itself. But certainly there are special interest forces that always occupy territories where they have of sort of an interest. And the big interest for Niger is that all of the militaries throughout the world have someone there safeguarding their extraction of the mineral resources itself. And I'm talking about a very vital resource but it's also a resource that have to be safeguarded from terrorists itself. So yeah, you're going to have many of the nations that are going to be there as a part of the NATO alliance. And, you always have lone wolves, and you always have people who abuse power. But at the same time, too, the people themselves who are in these nations, they also monitor who they let and allow come into the country to occupy and do business, and who they do business with. So the leaders themselves, you know, they have to be proactive into knowing what's happening all times with even foreign occupation. Those government and their agents and agencies that are there to monitor the business activities that they have going on, and also to act as a safeguard. But sometimes these organizations that they hire to come there, these outside foreign forces, they are hired to come there to also protect the actual natural resource itself. So you can't really fault them at that. They're just trying to make sure sometimes that the actual vital resource itself, in this discussion, yellow cake uranium, has to be heavily guarded. Any and everyone should not have access to materials like that. And for some of those forces that are there, they are there as an alliance to the world themselves. Even the nation of Niger have them come there to be a part of safeguarding the asset itself. But what the uproar is about is that the commodity itself, the extraction of the commodities and the materials that are taken from the lands, is not matching up to what the people feel like they should be getting themselves to boost their nation up. For such a valuable material itself, man, that place should be looking like Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Miami, Florida. Many of the places like that. So when you go there, you're just like, man, the infrastructure is so underdeveloped, and like this place is way back in time. And many of the African nations are. Many of the African nations are at least 100 years behind the rest of the world. And the intelligent young black men and women of today who are in executive positions and are coming into election and taking seat in these positions, they recognize the disparities and are now taking charge and holding the people accountable.
Very good. Yeah. So anyways, there is another thing you mentioned. I want to look at that. As you can see on our screen, we have a picture of village that is destroyed by Shell. Shell is it's a colonizer company that deals with gas. And you mentioned about environment. As you can see, this village is actually done. And on the article I have here, the evidence we have a review showed that Shell repeatedly encouraged the Nigerian military to deal with community protesters, even when it knew the horror this would lead to an unlawful killing and rape and torture of burning of villages. So Shell were taken to the court by Nigerian citizens in those villages where it frauded the gas in a house, in a place where people live. And then once they start to protest, Shell actually decided to send military and to kill these people. And you talk about environment in Nigeria. I'm talking now in Nigeria, but we are in general, we talk about Africa in general with this environment. So what do you think people should do with these hungry companies that only look the benefits, but they don't look the interest of the people or even the future of the country itself or the continent, as you can see on pitch. So what do you think we need to do in order to preserve our environment? Because obviously you need to have oxygen, you need to have food, you need to have where to stand. In order to do anything. It doesn't matter if it's Pan-Africanism, it doesn't matter if it's activism, it doesn't matter if it's politics, whatever it is, you need to have an environment that is good or conducive to do that. So what will you suggest for our leaders, for our citizens specifically, because they are the ones who are impacted with these things often? What should we do to preserve and protect the motherland?
Yeah, for sure, brother. Thank you for that question right there. And a big shout out to Brother Gashi Tamiru Ethiopian brother with the Ethiopia Environmental Organization. And this brother has been a strong advocate for environmental concerns and also bringing forth change with how we use energy and our resources. But yeah, when you speak about this, with the degradation of the environment itself, these things are very important. And what's happening is, you got companies like Shell and all these corporations that have been there for, some of them been more than there for more than 100, 200 years. And they've actually gotten over like a fat rat. And what's happening is they're taking the natural resources. They don't care whether or not the people who live amongst there, the African people, they don't care whether or not that the land has become not, an environmental condition where it is not usable anymore. Because it's been extracting, and on the back end, they're the ones that's been getting rich from the actual situation itself. The people themselves are left with a total mess. But we also have to understand that policies have to be looked at today. The new breed leader generation, the new breed leader African generation understand that policies have to be examined. They have to be dug into. And also refined to bring it into modern day standards. Just like, you have an old house, you can't go for, 100 years or more and don't actually look at what's going on with the actual foundation of it to see what's holding everything together, see if it needs to be brought into modern day standards. And that's certainly what's happening right now with our new breed leader generation, looking at the trade treaties and the actual commercial policies that are being developed with these corporations. Certainly, a company like Shell, as large as it is, it should have been in there cleaning up a long time ago. But it is, you can strongly see that the well-being of the people itself has not been a major concern. But the people themselves also at some point in time, along with the government itself, have to demand more for the environmental cleanup initiative. And these this is when you get people like Greenpeace come into play, because if the rest of the world can't hear you about a cleanup, then Nigeria and any other nation in Africa need to be calling in organizations like Greenpeace to help them get on these people so that they can get the funding necessarily for a cleanup. But also we get back to the discussion about limiting term limits on how long these companies have been there doing business and have not really done anything to bring the people up or even the actual land and the infrastructure up. So yeah, Black Power, I take my hat off to all these new breed leader people who are in seat now that have a concern about what's going on because it directly affects us. We talk about with the medical situation of African people, most likely those are the ones that are affected by what's happening. Environmental do not necessarily have the medical resources to even keep themselves well with this when the environment is destroyed, and there's no one there to pull the horn, pull the level down on these folks that have been abusing their power. So,
Yeah.
It's just one of those things.
Okay, yeah. So anyways, I have another question regarding that before I let you go. Is regarding Russia in Africa. I think that obviously for now, everyone should be aware that there is shift on African leaders. And even in fact, I believe that young people in Africa, I found this to be so interesting. They are more towards Russia and possibly China compared to Western. The idea or the way young people in Africa, even here in Ethiopia, in fact, is so high. And what do you think we should expect? What is this? Why people are not Africa. Instead, they are pro-Russia and China. Why is this?
Well, I think from a Pan-African standpoint of view, I can't really say that we black people are one or the other, but I can say this. With the people being woke now, and with black people being more educated and woke about what's going on from a global perspective, the intelligence is there. And whereas many of the Western nations have demonized a country like Russia and China, and of course, we have many of our brothers and sisters, African brothers and sisters, have had the opportunity to go there, study. Many of them have lived in those nations for a few minutes and realized that the West is telling a freaking lie. And what they do, they psychologically punish us if they feel that there's any connection to communism or socialism or of a organized thinking or having some form of activity with these nations, saying that they are not of democracy and these nations should not be trusted. That's a bunch of smoke now, and the people realize that also. It's been about the economic power struggle with resources themselves that have been put into place, but from an overall historical standpoint of view as well, Russia have never colonized, hurt, destroyed, punished, despised, stole anything from African people. And the people understand this as well. So when you talk about democracy, I think America itself, along with the United Kingdom and all the rest of those nations, Belgium and Germany, they need to examine themselves when they talk about democracy and who's acceptable in the big boys club just based on these principles. But I think the people also realize too that those principles are not set in firm for a nation to be firmly mounted on. Those are not the only principles that nations are built on, Democrat or Republican. Sometimes it just gets down to being understanding basic human principles and respect, but also being concerned about major issues that affect the people at large. I often coin the term that if a government or a nation is not able to support and back what the people need for themselves as a nation and as a collective, then the people have a right to overthrow and put mechanisms into place that's going to be beneficial and the most wise thing to do in order to keep a government or a nation at its best. And that means sometimes having to put certain things and people out of office, or even shutting down a certain type of office, even to maintain the will of the people. And the will of the people outweigh more than anything, because the will of the people are about moral and standards and upholding laws and principles. And no one wants war. But sometimes, it's like having a bully on the playground. You're going to have to take off and put them dukes up and to defend yourself. And that is certainly what it's about as well, as a part of life.
Yeah, so definitely. I think that it's a struggle of power. China wants power, and Russia wants power, and everyone wants power. In fact, France wants power in Africa. The Western, in fact, they are one in one package. NATO, which destroyed Libya to the extent is seized, it does not exist anymore. They want power and so on. So it's everyone fighting their own power, not African power. So African leaders, who always avoid to unite, by the way, they should figure out how to fight for their own power, not fight for Russian power. So
for sure. And when you speak about that, it's a process. It's a psychological process to keep the African people themselves destabilized. In the environments that they're in, they keep them under a pickle. I don't believe in all that terrorist stuff that they talk about that's going on. I think a lot of that is being orchestrated by
the Western.
Western powers, also corporations. You have to see world corporations that dominate and control industries. They're a major part of that as well. But the people are not as dumb as they think. And like you say, the times have changed because information is more available to the people. People are able to dig a little bit deeper. Unlike our ancestors, they didn't have the information. They didn't have access to the information to really dig into, get the true aspects of what's happening with many of the policies that are being made, many of the contracts that are being negotiated. And like I said, now with the new breed leader, African generation coming into play, it's a new sheriff in town. And I'm certainly I'm glad to see that's happening in our day and time.
So now I got two questions. One is that, do you think, in your views, that Western Africa people, especially those like citizens of Mali, Burkina Faso, this in Niger, and the other countries like Ivory Coast, do you think they trust ECOWAS?
Well, institution itself is only as great as the people who are engaged in it. And, of course, every time you have an election take place, a new administration come in, so the dynamics of the people who would be appointed, they would be appointing new people to go into ECOWAS. It's not like the people stay there and maintain the office itself. The office changes itself every 4 to 8 years, or whenever the election process occurs in that nation. So, it's a hard question to answer just based on that dynamic. But I certainly think now, we just recently had new elections take place within the last couple of years there in Africa. So when you talk about the new people that are going to be in place to govern any of the institutions, whether it's ECOWAS, whether it's the African Continental Free Trade Initiative, whether it's the African Union, every time the administration changed, new people come in to take position in these departments. So I believe as long as you get the right people in place that you elect, things will keep rolling along smoothly. But the main thing right now is the African nations themselves is to, war and scrimmages amongst people, just being human beings. That type of stuff will happen. But I also think that people have to be vigilant to understand how these things are happening. But the main thing is to keep the nation stable enough, and especially in the ECOWAS regions while the African Industrial Revolution is going on. This is real important right now. You're going to hear more and more people talk about this. And there are many smart cities that are going online. There are many plans in place to bring infrastructure from, roads to highways to rail to airline links all over Africa. And this can only be done if the people themselves are in will to make this stuff happen. But at the same time, you have to have people who are part of the alliances like ECOWAS to be able to enforce who's ever engaged in war type activity. They're going to have to put some control mechanisms in place to safeguard the interests of the people, but also safeguard the interests of the actual assets themselves, and then making sure that the situation doesn't get out of hand to where these military coups and things like that become in a civil war and becomes genocidal, stuff that really don't make any sense at all, because the people can be hyped up and get to fighting and don't even know the reason why they fighting in there. And then next thing you know, you have a bunch of dead bodies laying everywhere. So black power to those who enforce the law. in Africa. And that's some real stuff. That's real talk for you right there.
Very good, very good. So should we say that, or should Patrice Talon, the president of Togo, and president of not Togo, Benin, and the president of Togo, who is the Faule Nyasingbe, and the president of Ivory Coast, Alassane Ouattara, and the president of Mali, should they expect a coup in the country?
Well, they just had a little scrimmage not too long ago. You know, it's been some uprisings from Senegal all the way up. Most of them have been the French Francophone countries, nations that have been having these small scrimmages. And of course, that's because it's been orchestrated as well. You know, you got France there. You keep the people confused and discombobulated about what's happening on the back end, and they don't know what's going out at sea on the export. So, but the people on the political side of it, you know, they just have to be vigilant and aware of what's happening on each end, and don't get sucker punched by some stuff that really doesn't have a concern, really doesn't have validity to the reason why the people are fighting. But a lot of the turn up that you get right now, like I said, is the Franco-French nations. They're sick and tired of France being there, governing, taking all the resources, getting rich. Then they look on the TV and they say, hey, man, I'm over here in Senegal. I'm over here in Burkina Faso. I'm over here in Cote d'Ivoire. I'm living day to day trying to get a paycheck. When I see these people over here in France and how they living, they look like they're having fun. But most of the resources that they're having fun off of, and the mineral resources and the money that's being collected, even the money that's being housed in their banks on the behalf of the African nation, as what they so-called, quote unquote, say safe, secure deposits for these nations, the people are not feeling it anymore. You know, they see the Gucci and the Louis V, and, you know, they see the big, nice cars that the folks are riding around in over there in France, and the people are now smart enough to know that, hey, it's been too many years that they've been getting over, and you can't get over on the folks no more. You can't get over on the people. It's hard to get over on the people now. And so now that the dynamics of new global change in how things are being, the well-being of the nation itself is much broader and more dynamic and more sophisticated. And like I said again, the people are woke, so it's hard to pull wool over the people's eyes that are woke, because they see you putting the wool on their eyes. They say, what the hell is this? So, you know, they want you to hurry up and get up out of there and or pay up. You know, many of those nations owe reparations as well. That's another thing. Those Babylonian nations been getting over on African people, man, all the way from the time of slavery. And they realize this, you know, through colonization and slavery, and with the people being woke now, they know that these folks owe a whole lot. And so it's one of two things that they're going to have to do. You know, there's going to be some pushback, and it's going to be some reform, and there's even going to be some revolution. But we the people have the power in our hands, and so we have to take the control of the narrative of how things are going to turn out, and make sure that we safeguard those mechanisms that our forefathers, our African forefathers, want us to have in place for ourselves to survive on. Hey, it's a cold, cold world, but we the people,
so
we the ones
we should
got to take control.
We should expect a coups in the future here in Africa.
Well, if we unite as Pan-Africans, and, you know, we take on the principles of the Honorable Marcus Garvey and the principles of Selassie Haile and Kwame Ture and all of our dynamic elders that had come before us, who laid the footprint out way back in, you know, the early 1900s. We need to unify and unite. So big shout out to Brother Julius Malema, down there in South Africa with the South African Economic Freedom Fighters, came out and gave a tremendous speech this week with the 10th anniversary of the Economic Freedom Fighters organization. And the brother was on point. You know, in order for Africa to get stronger, if we want African people to get stronger ourselves, we have to unite. We got to put down and set aside the tribalism, the religion, the false religions that we've been doctrined with. Now that we know that also, you know, that's coming into play. People understand how religion itself has been flipped on us, and, you know, the politics and the false boundaries that have been put into place. But we unify Africa and the states themselves. We unite one African president. We have one unified African army. We have one unified African industrial and financial complex. Yeah, we can move. We can really level up, and this is what we're moving towards. Yeah, that's my brother right there. We said Dr. Umar. He was there with. Shout out to Dr. Umar and Tunde. Went out and fellowship with our brothers and sisters in South Africa, also in Ethiopia. Went down to have some serious talks and discussion about how the African diaspora and how we can be more benefit to each other, collaborating, doing business, and as well as conducting political moves with ourselves to unify the African people. And Brother Julius Malema came on with his conversation this week and gave a tremendous speech of unification. But he laid down the foundation that we have to move towards the principles of the Honorable Marcus Garvey and many of our dynamic brothers and sisters who wanted to unify Africans as one united people. I take my hat off. Black power.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely true. Dr. Umar Johnson was there, and he's going to be in Cameroon at the end of this month, according to the schedule I have. Around maybe 25th, he will be in Cameroon. So yeah, Julius Malema is he been pushing very good. I think he's among trusted people in leadership, even though leaders most of the time they change, but he's among trusted. So he's been pushing. And let's listen to what he have to say about the coup in Niger.
Fellow global citizens must, however, touch on some key international issues that require our attention. And first and foremost, we must speak about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It must be understood that as the EFF, we believe that the conflict between these two nations must be resolved, and it must be resolved peacefully. We want to make it categorically clear, however, that we believe the conflict arises because of NATO uncontrollable desire to infringe on the territorial integrity of Russia by setting up military capacity on its borders. That is the genesis of the conflict on international affairs and their inability to resist pressure from NATO to arrest President Putin. South Africa is at the current stage led by an individual who cannot take a firm position on any matter, even if his life allies. Any effort to fight against imperialism, the calls for de-dollarization and for an alliance that will place BRICS nations on a stronger footing in the globe will always be undermined by a cowardly government in South Africa. Members of the international community, we hope that countries such as China and India will, in solidarity with President Putin, not allow their presidents to attend the BRICS summit. There will not be the Israeli embassy in South Africa until there is peace in Palestine. Humanity has been undermined by NATO forces and the USA. Members of the international community, we take this opportunity to call for a meaningful solidarity with Palestine. Under the EFF government, there will not be the Israeli embassy in South Africa until there is peace in Palestine. We must not just pay a lip service when people are dying in their numbers. The people of Palestine continue to suffer unspeakable human rights violations, and their land is annexed constantly. Their children are murdered. their sites to practice religion are destroyed while the whole world watches. I say so because we are the beneficiaries of international solidarity ourselves. If there was no international solidarity support to South Africa, we're not going to be where we are. And this is our turn to also show support to all those who are being oppressed by other nations. We want the people of Western Sahara to have their land back without any interference by Morocco. But Morocco and Western Sahara should exist as brothers and sisters and not see each other as enemies. We're asking for peace and comrades in Cuba who suffer under the yoke so that our people receive the primary health care. We're calling for an end to ideologically inspired sanctions by nations in the West that are used as a tool to undermine the sovereignty of nations in the global South and Africa. In Zimbabwe, not that we agree with the government of Zimbabwe or the president of Zimbabwe, but it is the people, the ordinary people of Zimbabwe who are suffering under these sanctions. And we want the sanctions lifted, and we want the people of Zimbabwe, particularly those who are in South Africa, to return back to Zimbabwe and make their own determination as to how they want their country to succeed. But that country will never succeed under the sanctions. Africa has been independent for more than 60 years. Yet we experience challenges of development even after 6 years of independence. The Western countries cannot live without African continent, using our fellow African brothers to destroy ourselves. We want peace in Mali and welcome the dropping of French as an official language in Mali. That is one progressive movement. Doesn't mean French cannot be spoken, but to say we have conquered the imperialists and colonizers and continue to have their languages as official languages is self-imprisonment. We call for peace in the land of Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, who paid the price of his own blood by the coup orchestrated by the Western. We call for peace in Sudan and reconciliation of the Sudanese people who are tired to see the silence of the international community towards the continuous bloodshed in the eastern DRC. The Western countries supporting some neighboring countries in DRC to destabilize the eastern DRC. We shouldn't find it exciting that African countries can fight amongst themselves with ease, especially fighting around territorial expansions. Africa is one country, it's not even a continent. These borders we see and we experience here in our continent were imposed on us by the imperialists. No African brother should derive pleasure out of killing other African people. We say this because we're advocating for one Africa with one currency, with one legislature, with one military and one president. Because we believe that these small pockets of countries are the ones that make international communities undermine Africa. Just imagine one president of Russia or America calling all the presidents of all countries to their countries to be addressed by one.
Yeah, so Eugene, you raised the hand. What's going on?
No, I'm just saying one. He said that's what he's talking about. He's talking about one. He's talking about one president for Africa. And that's what I was putting my finger up. One love, brother. That's what I say all the time.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
We see that as belittling and undermining our continent. We believe that if we have one currency based on our mineral and natural resources, it will be one such a strong currency, and it will place Africa firmly on the international table. The war in Mozambique is exactly what I spoke about. But the problem, you are right, is these foreign interests that are interfering and even sponsoring the killing of each other in Mozambique. We should not, as Africans, anywhere, because we are rejected, we are hated everywhere. We should not find it easy to fight with each other. It must be the most painful and the most difficult thing for an African to take up guns and shoot at another African. Because if others can do it, they will do it with ease. It must be difficult for us. We are hated everywhere in the world. We are treated like we are not human beings. Why should we treat each other like that ourselves? That's why the EFF here in South Africa is told every time that we won't vote for you because you want foreigners in our country, you protect foreigners in our country. So be it. We're not going to kill Africans in exchange for votes. I will rather stay at home in the villages because that is not just us. So we...
Here you got it, Julius Malema. You were saying about him, I think he's articulating exactly what a lot of Africans want to hear, which is one, the people, African people are sick, tired of division, not only in Africa, but also from the division of our people globally. So we are tired, that's number one. And I support his idea that we should have one military power, we should have one foreign minister, we should have one identity, we should have one money and all of that. We should have one leader. I think that is something that every Pan-African have talked or will desire to have. Now, the question is, how will that be? Because if we do so, do we gonna go ahead and if we get a one ID, how do we gonna deal with our people in diaspora? Do we gonna have to bring everyone home, or do we gonna give them some kind of identification? How that can be done?
Well, you know, the African Union, through the 6 region initiative plan for the African diaspora to return to the continent, certainly there have been plenty dialogue about structuring how the African diaspora is to be treated, and especially when they identify the nation where their ancestors actually come from. But this is all a part of big talk and discussions that we've actually been having for more than 10 years now. And it really goes back, if I'm not mistaken, the early days of the 1970s. And we have people like Dr. Mulana Malana out of Ghana. They were some of the first pioneers that had worked towards getting the inclusion of the African diaspora back to what's taking place there on the continent, being a part of what's the initial plans of being inclusive of the African diaspora and the policy-making procedures of Africa. But as far as the unification of Africa, I don't think it would be impossible. You know, certainly all of us are leaders, and the government itself is only as strong as the people and the will of the people. And this is some discussion that has been taking place for many centuries as well, you know, with the message that was being delivered by the Honorable Marcus Garvey in the early 1900s, many of the leaders of that time period. So, you know, we're some resilient people. We've gone through a lot, but policies make for perfection. And as we are finding ourselves and identifying who we are in a world of confusion, of course, this is some very vital information that we must continue to discuss and share amongst ourselves, but also be proactive. We can't just talk about it. We have to be about it and really walk that walk. You put your money where your mouth is. And with all of this, I feel that we're on our way to a very dynamic and a good future for ourselves as African people.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm not saying that we should not unite. That I strongly believe that we must unite, and I think it's even too late to do that. But my concern is just how do we gonna handle the diaspora? Because me personally, I strongly believe that our fellow African in diaspora, we cannot bring them home, everyone. That's number one.
Well, I'm gonna be straightforward with you. You know, all Africans in the diaspora, they don't want to be a part of Africa. I just be I'm point blank with you about this. Many Africans in the diaspora are very comfortable with where they are in the nations of Babylon, where they live at. But then you only have a percentage of Africans in the diaspora, which collectively understand the dynamics of where they exist in the realm of just being Africa. We don't really necessarily call it Africa because the actual name for Africa is Alkebulan, and being from the spiritual aspects, being connected through roots, it certainly brings us back to getting reconnected, and that comes from a broad perspective of why it is that many of the Africans in the diaspora want to go home. Some of them want to go back for a whole lot of reasons. Some want to go there to get reconnected with their ancestors after being abducted into slavery and not having a connection to where it is that they originally come from. They want to get that reconnection from a cultural standpoint, and also just following their roots, getting reconnected to the people that they're connected to on the continent. Some are going there because they want to go take advantage of the many business opportunities that exist, the investment in business opportunities. So that's a good thing. It's a win-win situation on both ends. But some of the Africans that exist in the African diaspora, I'm also going to be truthful with you. Some of them you don't want there. Just being straight up and point blank about that too, because they carry many bad habits from living in Babylon, and certainly the bad habits are not welcome there. The lifestyle itself is not a very good matchup for what the people, how they exist, and what the culture stands for there in Africa. Many of the corrupt mindsets of the people and the politics, and sometimes people can have too much freedoms to do any and everything, and that is not good neither, because it leads to corruption and malpractice. So we certainly I want to make it clear there for you. So y'all Africans on the continent, don't get it twisted. But I also like to say this to Africans on the continent. A lot of times there are certain groups of African people that are looked down upon, and they come directly from our brothers and sisters right there on the continent. And they was like, well, we don't have any association with them people. They don't know anything about our culture. They don't know anything about, our tribal connections and things of that nature. They don't share the same African principles as we do. And, those folks over there in the West, they more white acting than we are here. So what could it be that we possibly have in common? And I get back down to it. I get right down to the centerpiece of it. What we have in common is the genetic, and we have a whole lot in common, more so than what you think. And I also say this to Africans in the diaspora and on the continent too. If anytime any African from the diaspora, whether they have been away from the continents since colonialization or slavery, if they want to come back to the continent, to any nation that they want to be on, Africa is for Africans. And if they want to come back, they should be welcomed with arms open, because a lot of the atrocities too stem from the very African people that are there now on the continent. Slavery didn't happen by itself. Slavery wasn't all the white man's fault. Slavery was largely because of the dynamic and the thinking of the African people, who also helped bankroll that and got rich off of it. So, we're not in a position where we want to start pointing fingers at this and that, because I also say that we can't go back and change the past, but we certainly can control the dynamics of our future. And if we are to move forward in a positive thinking people who want to contribute to make things better for our young African generation that's coming up behind us, and we certainly have to make a physical and assertive effort for bringing retribution to ourselves, and that comes with being on the front line. And sometimes it's hard, and the real heavy facts of being on the front line and having discussions about some very serious matters, but that's what adults do. We are not children. And I often say we are not our parents, and we're not our grandparents' generation. We are a new breed leader, African generation, who have enough respect for ourselves as Black men and women to be able to open our mouths, stand up, and pull together as a collective to not complain, but to resolve problems and come up with solutions to our problems so that we can get it straight. That's what it's about. That's what Black power is about. And Black economics is Black power.
Yeah, so anyways, yeah, that's actually true. I don't think we can, all Black people should come to Africa, because it will be a loss. I strongly don't believe that. I don't even think it's a good idea. That's why I differ with Marcos Garvey. We can't take all Black people out of diaspora or out of Africa and bring them back to Africa. Why? Because Black people, they built it. How do you gonna take people who built America without getting paid anything, and then you take them back to Africa? What is that? That's not justice for them. That's number one. Number two is that they will not come anyways, because they are comfortable where they are. So I don't think everyone is deserved to live in Africa, because Africa is a little rough. Economically, especially, is rough. I can tell you that for now. A lot of people possibly will not even make it that long. So some of people will not.
Yeah, but things are changing. People are smarter these days, and you're working with people who are very resourceful. The people will move to Africa, but some don't want to all move there. Some people want to be on both fronts. They're comfortable living in, the nations where they grew up and are familiar with, but they also know that they have both a political, social, and spiritual and cultural right to be a part of what's happening there in Africa as well. So you can't deny them of that.
Yeah, definitely we cannot. But also, I think that's where we need to figure out how can we make sure that people who want to come, they can come and go back if they want to, or those who want to come and they completely stay, they can come and do so. And those who don't even want to come and don't even want to identify with Africa, because you have some of them, they also have the right to do so, because obviously at the end of the day, maybe one man may not want to be identified as an African, but his or her children will want to identify as African. So how can we organize a platform or a system that can offer our people privilege and protection, even though they may not be technically on motherland Africa? Because that's the most important, to make sure that we count our people. We know where they are or who they are, and those who want, they can come. Those who don't want, who care? But still, as a mother, Africa, we should have something in a process or in a system like that. So that is one of the things we need to study, because we have never be able to address that issue completely. Africa Union failed and is failing now even because it disrespected and rejected diaspora. It did not. You cannot embrace or welcome Pan-Africanism while you do not include clear, like completely clear on diaspora. When I say completely clear, it means that, hey, these people, it's not just gonna be 6 blocks. No, this is how many people we have. This is the identification, or this is a passport, or this is investment policy that only for these people. This is the land, or this is the contribution. This is the support. This is the budget to help them in this area, or something like that. But just say, oh, you are 6 blocks. That is absolutely, it's not completely been counting them or hold them responsible, and also bring them to, hey, this is, we know who you are, you know. And when it comes to what you say that we cannot just bring everyone, like this, I was watching one music, this Lil Nas or something like that, some crazy boy. You can't bring these things to Africa. You cannot. Definitely you can. This is madness, okay? Some people, they are done. They are completely done. So some of them they are done in culture. Some of them they are done in behavior, in vision, in morals and values. And so you can bring that. It's a pollution. And you mentioned the idea that some people.
But let me interject, Brother Monty. We all brothers and sisters. I'm gonna say this right now. All Africans on the continent are not that great in how they are as a people as well. So you can't say the Africans in the diaspora are better or worse than the ones that are on the continent. I don't think neither one of us can, speak on behalf of each other. That's like the pot calling the kettle black. So I think right now for us is to make sure that we're in a frame of mind, understanding that we all are from Africa, and Africa itself is our responsibility, whether you are on the continent or not. It is our responsibility as a people of, it's our background, it's our culture, it's where we're from. And you can be born in the United States, you can be born in the UK, you can be born in Kenya, but when they get back down to it, we all are connected to one genetic link of people that defines us, who we are as Black people. So, enough with I think a lot of times when we have discussions, it kind of get very confusing and they sometimes divide the people, but we're moving towards a more perspective of just understanding not all people who may not want to go to Africa, that's their prerogative, but those who do want to come to Africa, they must feel that they're welcome and they should be welcomed. And when brothers and sisters come to places like America or to the UK, when we see them and they come to our communities, they're not going into the white communities to live. Most of the time, they're coming directly into the communities where there have been traditionally foundation Black Americans, Africans living in communities where we identify and we feel comfortable with each other as a collective group of people. And that's what it's about, But other than that, we go dispersed and we go our ways and we mingle culturally with other people, because that's the dynamics of living in a world of different cultures. You put yourself in a position where you must learn to interact with the different cultures of people in order for ourselves to level up, because no one man can do it alone. And I know there's a lot of things that we have large controversies about in the past that have happened, both on the colonial perspective and on some of the things that have happened on the continent of Africa with our people. And it have not been pretty. The picture has not, the historical picture for everyone has not been pretty at all. But we as a new breed collective type of thinking, free thinking Black people, we must begin to think on a positive level that we can repair ourselves and we can lift ourselves up without the intervention of other cultures assisting us to do that. And the only way we can be able to do that is to unify ourselves and tear down the barriers of what we have built up. But before I go, I like to say this. I like to read off our creed because I do have to go. And I was supposed to be gone for a few minutes early but I don't want to take up much of the time. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Brother Amani Jean-Paul. Thank you, Brother Jerome Matias, Brother Raza Lula, Brother Dave Powell, Brother Bishop Williams, all our dynamic sisters, brothers and sisters all throughout the world who tune in each and every week to the New Africa Network to be a part of our conversation and our international broadcast. We are people who are certainly leveling the perspective up and carving out a narrative of where we want to be as an African people. And before I leave, I'd like to just read this creed off to as a part of who we are as a collective. For the New African Network, I am an African, regardless of where I was born, where I live, my ethnicity, my religion. Africa is my identity. God bless Africa. I am African. God bless Africa. I am Black. Black power. And I'll see you guys next time I come on the program. One love.
One love. Thank you so much, Brother Eugene, and have a nice evening. It was
Thank
nice
you, brother.
talking to you again.
We'll be talking later this week, brother. One love.
One love. Bye now.
Peace and blessings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that being said, I want to just add a few things on my program before I close because time has already gone. But as you already hear, we discussed a lot of topics around here. The biggest one or the most important is that we Black people of the world, regardless of our concept or understanding of who we are, we must have some kind of solidarity so that we can possibly overcome our challenges. So in pretty much, I think that's all I want to talk to you about today, guys. I will definitely come back with you on next week. Today we're focusing on more about the coups that is happening in most of African countries, especially previous French colonies, but even in Sudan as well. And people are pretty much not happy. Some people look on this leadership that we have, even though it's said they are democratic elected, but at the end of the day, it seems like they are still puppets of our colonizers. So that being said, I think that is what we were really discussing about, and if we should wait another coup in other countries, I think we really have to be aware of that. Possibly in countries like maybe Togo, Benin, Senegal, Guinea-Conakry, Cameroon. I think people need to be careful. We may experience another coups because people are not happy with what we have in those countries. So we definitely have to be conscious about that. Now, I don't think we have ever have fighting or some kind of killing people in these coups. I believe the coup in Burkina Faso, people did not die. I'm not sure, but there was not even the preview who was the leader was overthrown. There was no assassination. Same thing to Mali as well, and Niger and Guinea. So I don't think there is really anything that indicates that we can have conflict because of those coups. I don't think so. But maybe there is a few people may die, but I don't think there is anyone who has been assassinated because of the coup. Now, when it comes to Sudan, Sudan has been a tragedy. It's not been a coup. It's a conflict between the coup leaders. So yeah. Anyway, so that being said, I think that will conclude my program today for this week. Do not forget to find us on social media, Swahili for Africa, and in all medias, Instagram, Telegram, what is this, YouTube, Facebook, but also don't forget to find us on website as well. So we are there also as well. You can find us on website as well. I'll post that on Zen Patreon as well. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you a wonderful weekend. God bless Africa. I'm an African. Asante sana. Mungu ibariki Africa. Niño y niñas dor Africa. Adios, Dios bendigo Africa. Me llamo Juan Pablo Dorafea en español. Yo estoy aquí a Éthiopie. Je vous salue, je vous souhaite la bon week-end. Mes amis, mes petits frères et frères, n'importe là où vous êtes, c'était notre programme qu'on a parlé ce qui arrive en Afrique avec les coups d'État qui sont souvent arrivés dans notre continent. Donc, nous avons vu le coup au Niger, Mali, Burkina, et aussi en Guinée, je pense. Mais tous les coups, il n'y a, je pense pas qu'on a tué les gens comme ça. Donc, on peut dire que c'est les coups pacifiques. On peut dire que c'est les coups pacifiques. So, donc, on a discuté, on a parlé de ça, mais aussi on a parlé de la comment on dit, je vais vous, on vous a parlé de peut-être les coups qui peut arriver au pays comme le pays Togo peut-être, le pays la Côte d'Ivoire peut-être, ou bien la Sénégal aussi, et le Bénin, la Cameroun là, et il faut rester avec les yeux ouverts parce qu'on peut avoir les coups parmi les pays que je viens de vous dire. Donc, c'est ce qu'on a parlé. Merci beaucoup. Vous savez que mon français, ça marche pas, mais j'essaie comme ça. On vous souhaite la bonne week-end. On se reverra la prochaine occasion, là où on va parler les autres informations à propos de la Pan-Afrique. Au revoir. Je réponds au nom de Jean-Paul de la foi en français. Je vous parle ici en Éthiopie. Au revoir.
የሐሳብ ሰላምን ብዙ ነው የሚቀናኝ ድንገት ከተፍስር ካለበት ቦታ እየተላቀስን በናፍቆት በደስታ ታዲያ ምን ያደርጋል ነበር ቢሆን ለካስ በህልሜ ነው የማገኝ እኔ ፍቅር ናርገው በታውልሜ ፍቅር እንድወጣ ውራበትኔ ፍቅር ወይ ውሰደኝ ወይ ያምጣልኝ ፍቅር ያለዚያማ ጉዲ ነው እንጂ አለኝ ፍቅር ናርገው በታውልሜ ፍቅር እንድወጣ ውራበትኔ ፍቅር ወይ ውሰደኝ ወይ ያምጣልኝ ፍቅር ያለዚያማ ጉዲ ነው እንጂ አለኝ ፍቅር የኔ ፍቅር ጉዴ ነው ወንጀለኝ ጉዴ ነው ወንጀለኝ ጉዴ ነው ወንጀለኝ